Okay, section 5.6, sums and differences of rational expressions. So, yesterday we learned how to multiply and divide them. Today we learned to add and subtract them. And it's basically the same as adding and subtracting fractions, which I know so many of you just really enjoy doing. How do we add and subtract rational algebraic expressions? So, remember, to add and subtract fractions, you need to have equal denominators. So, if you have a over c plus b over c, well, that's great. That's just a plus b all over c. And if you have a over c minus b over c, that equals a minus b over c. So remember, you have to have the same denominator to add and subtract fractions. If you do not have the same denominator, you have to make the denominators equal. So the first task is to find the least common denominator of the fractions. This is the same as the least common multiple of their denominators. Once you find the least common multiple, you will express each fraction as an equivalent fraction with the LCD as the denominator. So that would be basically like saying if you're adding 1/2 and 1/3, the least common denominator is 6. So you would have to convert 1/2 to 3/6 and 1/3 to 2/6 before you can add them up to get 5/6. So you need to express each fraction as an equivalent fraction with the LCD as denominator. Once you get the denominator the same, then you can add or subtract and simplify the result. So let's take a look at how this works. Example 1, 1 over 6a squared plus 1 over 3b squared minus 2 over ab. The first trick is to find the least common denominator. We need to find the least common multiple. So, 6a squared and 3b squared, you see what they are. 2 times 3 times a squared. 3b squared is 3 times b squared, and ab is obviously a times b. For least common multiple, you need the highest degree of each factor. So we have a 2, you have a 3, you have an a squared and a b squared. So the least common multiple is going to be all those things multiplied together, which produces 6a squared b squared. That's step 1. You've found the least common multiple. You don't have to write this out every time because some of them you can just kind of see, but this gives you an idea of how to do it. So we now have to convert each fraction into some expression with 6a squared b squared, which means you have to convert by multiplying the same to the top and bottom. So the 6a squared, to make it a 6a squared b squared, we have to multiply the top and bottom by b squared. To make the 3b squared 6a squared b squared, we have to multiply the top and bottom by 2a squared. And finally, to make the ab a 6a squared b squared, you just have to multiply the top and bottom by 6ab. So what you're going to do is make sure you multiply the bottom by whatever you need to multiply to get to the least common denominator, and multiply the top of each fraction by the same amount. Alright, let's expand this, and you get b squared plus 2a squared minus 12ab, and each of those have the same denominator. So with the same denominator, you can now add and subtract them. So we get b squared plus 2a squared minus 12ab all over 6a squared b squared, and you're done. So again, find the least common denominator by using the least common multiple. Convert each fraction into an equivalent fraction with the common denominator by multiplying the top and bottom by the same value, and then simplify, and if necessary, reduce. Number 2, 2 over y squared plus 1 plus 5 over y. First question is, what is the least common denominator? Well, it's going to be y times y squared plus 1. Both of those are prime. You can't factor this. So you have y times y squared plus 1. So we multiply the left fraction by y above and below the line. And the fraction on the right, we have to get a y squared plus 1 on the bottom, so we multiply the same by the top. And now you can simplify and add. So you get 5y squared, which comes from here, plus 2y plus 5 all over y times y squared plus 1. So you see, it's not that difficult, but the key is to make sure you get the right least common denominator. And actually, in some ways, with letters, it's easier because you don't have to do all these factor trees. You just have to make sure that the bottom is factored, and you make sure each denominator has all the factors that are in both numbers. Alright, let's move to example 3. 2c to the negative 1 times d plus 2c d to the negative 1. So, We convert it first into a fraction. The c to the negative 1 is equal to 1 over c. The d to the negative 1 is equal to 1 over d. So the expression now becomes 2d over c plus 2c plus d. Now go ahead and try these yourself. This one is not as complicated as some of the ones that are coming up. So the least common multiple is CD, which means you multiply the left fraction by D above and below the bar. And the second fraction, we have to multiply the top and bottom by C. So what you're left with is 2D squared plus 2C squared all over CD. We can simplify by factoring out a 2, and you get 2 times the quantity D squared plus C squared all over CD. So again, notice the steps. Least common multiple, make sure you make sure you multiply the top and bottom by the thing that makes the denominator equal to the least common multiple, and then simplify. Example 4, a over b minus a plus b over a minus b. You don't always have to do a lot to find the least common multiple. What can you do to the b minus a fraction to make it a denominator of a minus b? All you have to do is multiply the top and bottom by negative 1. So if you do that, you see you get negative 1 times a over negative 1 times b minus a plus b over a minus b. If you notice, what happens is you get a negative a up here, but the b minus a becomes an a minus b. And all of a sudden you have the same denominator, and you can just add and subtract as before. So if you do that, you get negative a plus b all over a minus b. Again, you can factor out a negative 1. Negative 1 times a minus b is equal to negative a plus b. And now your numerator and denominator have common factors. You can reduce those by canceling those out. And so the answer to number 4 is simply negative 1. So sometimes you don't need to find a least common multiple or least common denominator by adding factors. You just have to switch the order. Whenever you want to switch the order of a denominator, you just need to multiply the top and bottom by negative 1. Finally, example number 5, 5 over s squared minus s plus 1 over s squared minus 1. So now you have to factor the denominators. Once you factor the denominators, you can easily find the least common multiple. So go ahead and try this one and check your answer when you're ready. Alright, so once you factor the denominators, you get 5 over s times s minus 1 plus 1 over s plus 1 s minus 1, difference of squares. So now you need to figure out what the least common denominator is. You know, this has an s and an s minus 1. This has an s plus 1 and an s minus 1. So what you need to do is find that the least common denominator is s times s minus 1 times s plus 1. All three factors must be in the common denominator. So which means you have to multiply the left fraction by an s plus 1 on the top and the bottom, and the right fraction by an s on the top and the bottom. So let's do that. 5 times s plus 1 quantity all over the least common denominator plus 1 times s divided by the least common denominator. So for the left fraction, we multiply the top and bottom by s plus 1. For the right fraction, we multiply the top and bottom by an s. And now you simplify. 5s plus 5 plus s all over s times s minus 1 s plus 1, combine like terms, and your answer 6s plus 5 over s times s minus 1 times s plus 1. So the only skill we learned today was find the least common denominator, convert each fraction to an equivalent fraction using the same least common denominator by multiplying the top and bottom by any missing factors, and then simplifying. And that's it. That's it for section 5-6. If you have questions, please ask me during class or post a message on the Facebook page.